Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal, and today we are looking at the death of a 22-year-old woman who left two children motherless when she died August 3rd of 1982 from a clotting disorder after a safe legal abortion performed by Dr. Yul Choi at Plymouth General Hospital near Detroit. For some reason, Choi decided to use the risky and antiquated saline abortion method. And to understand why deaths like this young woman's are so infuriating, I'm going to tell you a little bit about these saline abortions. In 1939, a Russian whose surname is the only one I've been able to find, it was Abruel, got the idea to take amniotic fluid out and replace it with something to kill the fetus and or induce premature labor. The different substances were tried with varying success and varying complications, but hypertonic saline, which is a strong salt solution, became the most popular. Abortions that involve taking out amniotic fluid and replacing it with something else are called instillation abortions or amniotic fluid replacement abortions, or are named after the substance injected. So I use the term saline abortion and saline instillation interchangeably. Now, these are not done anymore because with ultrasound guidance, the practitioner is able to guide the needle directly into the heart or brain of the baby in through the soft spot and inject a drug to kill the baby in a manner that's much less risky to the mother than saline was. And honestly, these other abortion methods are much more humane for the baby than saline was. So saline abortion works by two methods. One is that it would kill the fetus, and the other is would irritate the uterus. Now, it's hardly a pleasant experience for the mother, so the abortionist removes as much amniotic fluid as possible using an amniocentesis syringe. He then replaces it with a strong, sterile salt solution that would poison and kill the fetus. And the woman would then go into labor and expel the dead baby. Instillation abortion spread into other nations where abortion was legal, and saline quickly became the favorite abortifacient, although other substances, including glucose, were tried. Glucose was quickly abandoned because it led to infection far more often than it succeeded in killing the fetus. Now, saline abortions became very popular in Japan following World War II, but within the Japanese medical community, word spread quickly that the method was unsatisfactory. Too many women were being injured and killed. Over 70 papers were published in the Japanese medical community reporting the hazards of saline abortions, including at least 60 maternal deaths. The Japanese Obstetrical and Gynecological Society condemned the technique and it was quickly abandoned. But the Japanese doctors were keeping the news of the trouble to themselves until Western nations discovered these abortions and embraced them with great enthusiasm. Well, two Japanese doctors, Takashi Wagatsuma and Yukio Manabe, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing their names wrong, broke the silence. Wagatsuma wrote, "It is, I think, worthwhile to report its rather disastrous consequences which we experienced in Japan." And Manabe wrote, "It is now known that any solution placed within the uterus can be absorbed rather quickly into the general circulation through the vascular system of the uterus and placenta. Thus, any solution used in the uterus for abortion must be absolutely safe, even if given by direct intravenous injection. A solution deadly to the fetus may be equally toxic and dangerous to the mother. In spite of accumulating undesirable reports, the use of hypertonic saline for abortion is still advocated and used in the United States and Great Britain. I would like to call attention to the dangers of the method, and I would predict further occurrences of death until this method is entirely forgotten in these countries." Wagatsuma's words were published in 1965 and Manabe's in 1969. So this is well before widespread legalization of abortion on demand. As Western abortionists gained experience with saline abortions, other grim reports arose. A British study published in 1966 found out that the saline could enter the mother's bloodstream and cause brain damage. Swedish researchers noticed an unacceptable high rate of complications and deaths. Sweden and the Soviet Union followed Japan in abandoning saline abortions as too dangerous for women clear back in the 1960s. But for whatever reason, American abortionists were deaf to these warnings. When New York had completely repealed its abortion law, doctors had tremendous leeway in how they performed abortions. So in New York City in particular, it became very popular to just pull out the amniotic fluid, put in the saline in a doctor's office, and send the woman home with instructions to just show up at a hospital when she went into labor. This, to say the least, was a highly irresponsible way to use an abortion technique that was risky even when performed in a hospital under close medical supervision. And women started dying from these saline abortions. And women were dying in California as well, even though the law there still required abortions to be performed in hospitals. And after Roe v. Wade was handed down, saline and other installation abortions spread to other areas of the country despite the dismal goings-on in New York and California. And, of course, more women died. And the doctors in the U.S. showed absolutely no alarm over these events. Even as late as the 1990s, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and abortions such as Dawn Sloan and Warren Hearn were describing saline and other installation abortions in such terms as a low-risk procedure, something 3 countries abandoned because it was so high risk to the women. Now, they did gradually move away from saline abortions, albeit more slowly in New York City than the rest of the country, but certainly not fast enough. Now, since the problem of maternal deaths from these abortions had been long documented, this factor, the risk to the mother, probably only had a minor impact in the move away from saline. One important factor was financial. Although suction and D&C were adequate procedures for first trimester abortions, they were inadequate for killing and removing the larger second trimester fetuses. But the uterus was not large enough to perform an installation abortion until after around 16 weeks. So this left a 4-week gray period during which, okay, it was too late to do a D&C, but it was too early to do a saline abortion. So they had to come up with a way to not lose those patients during the 4 weeks they could have to change their minds. There was also the problem of starting a suction or D&C abortion only to discover that the pregnancy was already in the second trimester. And necessity being the mother of invention, abortionists who found themselves dealing with second trimester fetuses that had already been damaged had to come up with ways to remove these fetuses quickly and without alarming the patients. So this gradually evolved into the D&E, or dilation and evacuation procedure, that remains popular for mid-trimester abortions even to this day. Now, D&E was much cheaper than installation abortions, which, if you were going to do it in even a remotely responsible way, required an overnight hospital stay. And it had the added advantage of, if you dismember the baby, you don't get a live birth. So, during the period while installation abortions were the most common method of mid-trimester abortions, roughly 500 live births were reported to the CDC every year. And the CDC's own Willard Cates said this number probably came nowhere near the true number of live births because there's no penalty for failing to report these births. As Cates said, it's like turning yourself into the IRS for an audit. So addressing the problems of live births, lost sales through that gray zone, and miscalculating gestational age, the abortion business has gradually phased out saline and other installation abortions, replacing them with D&E and dismemberment abortion, and gradually also with the labor and delivery abortions, where they use a lethal injection to kill the fetus and then induce labor. So Angel, the young woman who died perfectly needlessly. This guy had no excuse for not knowing how dangerous this abortion procedure was, and he performed it anyway.